Rise and shine. It is on the whistle time. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the On the Whistle podcast. I am your host for today, Alasdair Howorth, and we are talking CAF Champions League. Unfortunately, my brothers Zane and Courtney are not with me. They've got better things to do, aka covering Donald Trump's inauguration in the US, which they think is more important. I personally don't. I think CAF Champions League football is more important. But you're stuck with me, Alasdair Howorth, wearing my Blackburn Rovers Christmas hoodie. Yes, I was at the game on Tuesday where we lost at home to Coventry, which is why I'm desperate to talk about African football, not European or English football. But without further ado, the CAF Champions League group stage came to its conclusion this last weekend. 8 teams are through to the knockouts. 8 teams are gone. There's been thrills, spills, and plenty of wonder goals along the way. We're going to get into it. We're going to be short and sharp. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, let's get stuck in. Group A, there has only been one story in Group A, and that has been the story of the Champions League so far. Al Hilal, the Sudanese club that had been homeless for the last almost 18 months since, well, I'm getting close to 2 years now, actually, since the breakout of the Sudanese civil war, relocated to Mauritania, I think almost 3,000 miles away from Sudan. And yet, for the first time in, I think, 10 years since 2015, they've qualified for the knockouts in the CAF Champions League. Absolutely brilliant story from Florent Ibenge, top Congolese coach who's been leading them, and his team. They've also, they not only have they qualified, but they were the first team to qualify. They won the first 4 games. They qualified with ease. They then drew at home with Mouloudia. But this last game was perhaps a game to forget against TP Mazembe. TP Mazembe thrashed them 4-0. 4-0 was probably a harsh result, but here we are. And for TP Mazembe, it's definitely a sense of recovering some lost pride because they came into this group as the first seeded team, as the favorites, and yet they didn't win a single game until this last game of the group in this dead rubber against Al Hilal, and it's been a massive disappointment for them. They're the only team in African football history to be seeded first in their group and not make it out of the group stage, so it was a huge disappointment for them. And for Florent Ibenge, they didn't rotate too much, so I think there will be concerns for Al Hilal as they're heading into the knockouts later. They've got to turn their attention to the Mauritanian League, where there's still quite a few games to catch up. But if they win those, they'll go top again. But there will be some concerns for Al Hilal. They're a good team, brilliant manager. But the real question of this group was who was going to join them, because it was essentially a straight shootout. And this was the only game of the group stage that was a straight shootout. Yanga, aka Young Africans of Tanzania, hosting MC Alger, and it did not disappoint, not in terms of the excitement and the chances, but in terms of the perfect African football being put on display. And by perfect African football, I mean MC Alger, Mouloudia, put on an expert away performance in the CAF Champions League. Let me just run you through some of these stats, okay? 31% possession. They had less than half the amount of passes as Yanga. They only had 5 touches in Yanga's box. They doubled Yanga's tackles, had 17 interceptions to Yanga's 7, and a whopping 46 clearances. There was time wasting, there was box defending. And for Yanga, there'll be a huge disappointment because they pushed and they pushed, but it felt like they didn't have much in their game beyond give it to Stefan Azizki and see what he can do. And it almost paid off. Stefan Azizki almost scored a wonder goal in the first half. He did look good. He did look dangerous, but it just wasn't enough. And when they had that one chance, Clement Nzizi, 6 yards out, almost had to tap in. Ayub Abdellaoui, who made 12 clearances alone at centre back for Mouloudia, was there again to make a block. In short, defensive masterclass from Mouloudia, and that will be them joining Al Hilal in the next group, in the next stage in the knockouts. On to Group B, and this was the other group that had something riding on it. It was essentially a fight between Mamelodi Sundowns and Raja Casablanca to see who could get into the next round. Mamelodi Sundowns hosting AS FAR Rabat, and we saw kind of elements of the old Mamelodi Sundowns in negative ways and in some good ways. First 60 minutes, Mamelodi Sundowns completely on top. Totally dominant, possession stats controlled. I think AS FAR only had 1 shot in the first half. But unlike an old Mamelodi Sundowns, or by old I mean Rulani Mokwena Sundowns team, this team under Miguel Cardozo, while it does lack some of that kind of composure, that midfield dominance, the way in which they can keep the ball, they were dominant on set pieces, and they took the lead through a free kick. Peter Shalulule getting back amongst the goals after not really having such a stellar season, but we saw the nerves that Sundowns have been struck with over the last few years. And as the second half wore on, we saw that they became nervous, essentially. They couldn't keep the ball as much. They didn't dominate. They let AS FAR Rabat into it, and they got their deserved equalizer. That means that AS FAR Rabat topped the group, but the draw was enough for Mamelodi Sundowns because Raja Casablanca did not get the win that did not win by enough. They needed the results to go both their ways. They needed Sundowns to lose. They needed to win. They beat Maniema Union, the kind of basement boys of the group, 1-0, but it wasn't enough. And to be honest, it's nothing more than Raja deserved. They've been an absolute chaos off the pitch. I think they've had 2 or 3 presidents. They've had 4 managers. They're really struggling to Batola Pro despite being the champions. And so it is a disappointment for them. But here we are in the group of death. Raja Casablanca are the ones that miss out. On to Group C. I told you we'd keep it quick and fast, but this group had nothing on the line in terms of qualification to the next round. But there was plenty on the line in terms of who topped the group. And Orlando Pirates pulled off one of the big surprises of the round, beating Al Ahly 2-1 in Cairo. Al Ahly's first loss at home this season in any competition, and it's their first loss at home in the Champions League in years. I mean, they were 26 unbeaten, I think 27 unbeaten before they lost to Belouizdad, but that was an away game, so it is a huge shock. Now, we have to caveat this. Al Ahly, not only did they have huge amounts of injuries, they're missing World Cup semi-finalists like Ashraf Dari, Yahya Atiat Allah, they're also missing Ali Malul, Reda Slim, Tahir Mohamed, the list goes on. But they still were the stronger side in this game. They lost 2-1, but they dominated proceedings. And if not for a questionable offsides call in the last minute, Rami Rabia would have scored a spectacular equalizer. But he was judged to be offsides, even though there are essentially question marks about whether he was involved in the first phase of play, whether he was actually impacting the game. Leaving that to the side, I want to talk about Orlando Pirates. Brilliant performance from them. Really good away performance in the CAF Champions League. We know that this team is talented. We know they've got the likes of Maswangani, Mofokeng, Dion Hotto, all these guys going forward. But the question is, can they put that together defensively? And with the know-how that they haven't really had in the last few seasons, being out of continental competition, to go all the way. And they were my dark horses for this tournament because of Jose Ribeiro. And that's why I think they can go far this tournament. They came here, they put on the defensive masterclass in many ways. Yes, there were moments of naivety. I think of the goal that they conceded. They bombing forward when they win the ball, and then they get caught in transition. Brilliant ball over the top. And Hussein Al-Shahak grabs the equalizer. But I think they've got the goals in the likes of Mofokeng, who scored the first, Mabasa coming off the bench to score the second. But in Jose Rivera, they've got a cup specialist. They've got someone who knows how to get far in these tournaments. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on, because they've topped the group now and they've got that second seed. And now what that means is any team that's come first in their group will be furious with Pirates, because they could have the chance to get drawn against Al Ahly. Yes, Al Ahly have had these injuries. They're still the best team in Africa. They still have the most depth. They still will be the favorites, particularly when they get some of these guys back. In the other game, CR Belouizdad, I think, again, similarly to TP Mazembe in Group A, earned some respect back, restored some pride. 6-0 at home to Stade d'Abidjan. Yes, Belouizdad got humbled 6-1 away in Cairo, and they lost 3-0 to Pirates away, and they lost to Pirates both home and away. Really, really disappointing results. But in these last couple of games, they've really restored some faith. Well, I say last couple of games against Al Ahly, where they won at home, and of course now the 6-0 thrashing of Stade d'Abidjan. It means that they came close. They're 1 point behind Al Ahly, but ultimately is disappointment for Belouizdad, and particularly for a team that really sees itself as, should be pushing on for semifinals and finals. They've been in the quarterfinals the last few years, and they seem to fall at that stage. This time, they got drawn in a tough group. Yes, Orlando Pirates are probably the best third-seeded team in the competition, but it will be disappointment for them not to make it through to the next round. Last, and in terms of excitement, let's be honest, least of the groups. No disrespect to Esperance, Sagrada, and Pyramids, and Joliba, but it was not the hype group coming into this tournament, and it has not been the one that's delivered the drama. It's been easy as you go. Esperance and Pyramids cruising through. Esperance beating Sagrada Esperanza 4-1. Pyramids thrashing Joliba 6-0, which leaves them both level on points. And Esperance only beating Pyramids out in the head-to-head, which was why they topped the group despite having a worse goal difference. But I want to just quickly talk about Esperance. 4-1 against Sagrada Esperanza. And I think we're seeing this Esperance side kind of being rehabilitated. Last few years, they've been out of it. They haven't been competing at the top, either in the Tunisian league until last season, or in the CAF Champions League, where it's really been since, I would say, the teams that won it, 2017, 2018, those kind of teams where they've looked like one of the best. Yes, they made it to the semifinals, but I haven't been convinced by them. But they now have a really, really good team, and they've got some depth. And particularly, Ashraf Jabri, who scored a hat-trick in this game, was on loan in Algeria in the first half of the season, was called back by Romanian coach Laurențiu Reganchab. I know I butchered that, apologies. And he scores a hat-trick. And what that does is that not only does it provide goals, but it provides a backup to the likes of Rodrigo Rodriguez, brilliant Brazilian center forward. It means they have the depth. And when you've got players like Raja Casablanca, Elias Maquena, who came off the bench, suddenly this team has a lot of depth. Even defensively, think of the likes of Tugai, they've got one of the best goalkeepers in Africa, now Nietzsche, but they've got the team to get there, and I think actually this is a year where they've clearly invested a lot going into the Club World Cup. Let's not forget that they've got that this summer, and so I think that they will actually go farther in this Champions League. They'll be favourites in the next round. But the other team, Pyramids, is the really interesting one. Obviously, we know Moneybags Pyramids, bought by Turki Al Sheikh, Mr. Saudi sports minister, Mr. involved in everything, Riyadh season, etc., then sold to an Emirati. One of probably the least popular team in African football, very much because of the way in which they've bought themselves a seat at the top table. But they have not been able to compete at the top table until now. This is the first time they've gone out of the group stage of the CAF Champions League. And I think they will be an interesting one. But for me, all of it rests on whether they can keep a hold of Ibrahim Adel. Adel has been fantastic so far, both in the Champions League and in the league. He's already 23, so he's not super young. He's had quite a few years in the Egyptian Premier League, which for a lot of people will know that that's kind of a criticism of Egyptian Premier League. They hold on to players so long and they don't let them develop in Europe. We can talk about that another day. But he is terrific, brilliant winger, creative, great finish. He scored a brilliant bicycle kick the last week in the last minute to win Pyramids in the CAF Champions League. But he's heavily linked with Getafe. He's heavily linked with Rangers in Scotland. He's heavily linked with Lens in France. It is unlikely that he stays this January. We're thinking somewhere 5 to 8 million euros. If they can keep a hold of him, they can get to the semifinals and final. If they can't, it's really struggling to see the creativity and the kind of goal threat beyond Fiston Mihele for this team. I think it's going to be an interesting case, but that leaves us with our 8 teams in the group stage, in the knockouts of the CAF Champions League. Al Hilal, Mamelodi Sundowns, Asfar Rabat, which is probably the biggest surprise of that group, and then you've got Orlando Pirates, Al Ahly, Pyramids, and Esperance going into the knockouts. I can't wait. We will be previewing it once it comes around. That will be in a couple months, so we can take a break from the CAF Champions League. But it is going to be a brilliant round of knockouts, and we will be here to cover it for you. I hope that was as comprehensive as it gets within a short amount of time. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful, wonderful week.